Everyone, Joe Waxman here, and in this video I want to take a relatively quick look at the debate on seed oils. Obviously I have to weigh in. I don't have to, but I want to. Jim and I like to weigh in on a lot of things, but this is something I do have something to say about, and I do know something about, and it's it goes back. I mean, there's a lot of obfuscation going on. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of rhetoric. I don't know why, but there's definitely a concerted effort. I don't know who's behind it or what, but I know that there's a lot of propaganda. And I know this similarly because they did it with soybeans. There's a lot of confusion about soy, which I'm not really going to address here, but basically soy is not the bad guy. Just buy organic soy. There's a lot of, just do your own research. I mean, my gosh. People are nuts. Like, they do not believe facts. They just believe propaganda. But if you are not conditionable, if you're independent mindedly enough and the facts should be good enough. I mean, there's many more feminizing things than soy, but people don't care about that. Hops from beer, in fact, can negatively impact men's testosterone, can increase cancer, marijuana, all dairy. Dairy can have, especially commercially factory farm dairy. In any case, people want to demonize soy and ignore everything else. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And I just bring that up just to demonstrate the way people think. The same thing is going on with seed oils, but I'm going to talk about it. All right, so I watched this video where it was a debate, and I think debates are great where two people are going to try and best represent their side of the situation. Because it's very easy to make a one-sided argument when there's nobody pushing back. It's much more difficult to have somebody challenge your faulty assertions. In any case, I'm going to play a little bit of this. This is the guy who is anti-seed oil. And one of the things that you have to be wary of, or at least that I think, is that when they call seed oil, well, it's such a vague and broad term. You know what I mean? Like, if we're talking about, like, let's use saturated fat, for example. We just say saturated fat. Well, there's so many different kinds of saturated fat. You can talk about, lard, beef lard, or pig lard, or you could talk about butter or ghee or coconut oil, right? We have to be a lot more nuanced than to just lump it. It's very coarse and really doesn't get at the heart of the situation, which is one of my arguments about seed oil. I mean, there's so many different kinds of seeds and oil that comes from them, and they're all different. But I'm just going to play a little bit of his arguments.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll get into the details and stuff throughout anyway. This is just a quick kind of intro, so how I look at it anyway.
Right. But that's a good point that there will be links in the show notes to any resources from both Tucker and Matt.
Sorry.
It is more reasonable to believe that seed oils are beneficial rather than harmful for coronary heart disease risk. I disagree with this. And I will note that I usually refer to it as CVD, so it basically works out to the same thing. At current rates, this is a new disease, and it's important to note that this is a study from 1948 looking at the increase of heart disease in the United States. They found a rapid increase across all states that they looked at. Another study looking at a rapid increase in coronary cardiovascular disease in the UK. Again, rapid increase in cardiovascular disease. And this is an intensive look at three populations: white Americans, Japanese people living in Japan and America, and African Americans living in, and then versus Africans. And what they found was that the latter two populations had high rates of heart disease relatively versus very low rates in their native populations. This is important because it was a test of, is this a genetic disease or is it an environmental disease? And their conclusion was that, especially, for instance, in Japanese Americans, where they saw a rapid increase in heart disease in people who moved to the United States, that it was clearly an environmental disease and not a genetic disease.
All right, I'm going to stop right there and interject for a second. He's talking about coronary heart disease increases with the westernization or modernization of traditional diets. I just want to point out that Japanese eat high levels of, and he's blaming it on seed oils, specifically linoleic acid, which is an omega-6 fatty acid, which is essential for the body, mind you. We'll get to that. Our body cannot make it, we need it. He's blaming it on the rise of this. But guess what? Japan's main food oil is sesame oil, which is 45% linoleic acid. And he specifically talks about Japanese people. One of the things that is often, completely missing in these scientific debates is historical uses, which is, the weight of these in vivo, in real life studies, not studies, they're real life evidence of involving billions of people over thousands of years, far outweighs what any of these ridiculous little studies. I mean, they're not ridiculous. They're good. They help us. I don't want to diminish them, but I mean, we have to include, and the Japanese are just one people. Sesame seed in all its various forms is one of the most useful plant crops and seed oil crops in the world, used in Africa, Middle East, and all of Asia. One of the main oils. Okay, and he's saying that omega-6 and the increase of these omega-6 oils is a new phenomenon. It's not, buddy. I hate to break it to you, but it's as old as civilization itself. Like, this is really missing. Sesame seed oil. Like, you cannot talk about seed oils and exclude sesame seeds. You just can't. And you can't say it's linoleic acid when sesame oil is 45% linoleic acid, and it's the main oil of billions of people for thousands of years. Like, that just doesn't work. It's a bad argument. It is wrong. It's simply wrong. But we'll get to more of the nuances. I just want to let him finish.
There we go. So what changed during this time? This is strictly looking at the United States. We see a rapid decrease in the consumption of animal fats and an increase in things like shortening and margarine, specifically soybean oil and canola oil, along with various other seed oils, saw a rapid increase over the course of the 20th century. And
I just want to stop him again. He said a decrease in animal fats. Well, that's wrong too, because guess what? We have more animal fat available as society progresses, and due to farming techniques, poor people ate less animal food. That's just reality. And I'm not against animal food. I'm not against animal fats, but the reality is that people did not consume less animal fat over time. They consume more of it because there was more available. There's more available now than ever. Well, they're trying to, get rid of that. But, up until the last, year or two when they decided everyone should eat bugs. But there's just been, ever increasing amounts of animal food available. Now, and you could argue in restaurants that they prefer to use, like cheap vegetable oil. I would agree with that, but that's another situation. Anyway, it's not 100% clear. I mean, you could skew the data however you want, and that's what this debate is all about. But yeah, anyway, people weren't eating like shitloads of animal food and then they stopped eating animal food. That's nonsense. Like, the animal food wasn't available. Like, it's an expensive commodity, right? Poor people can't afford that much animal food. That's the way it goes. I mean, just think.
In the United States and then later around the world. This led to a rapid increase in linoleic acid during the course of the 20th century. The change in soybean oil consumption in the United States, according to the study, was about 1,000-fold and was far and away the biggest change in the food environment in the United States over that period. 7-country study, which was a seminal observational study conducted from 1958 to 1995, looked at some of these populations, including the Japanese, and found, interestingly, that the best explanation was the oxidizability of LDL particles. It was not LDL per se, because what
He's also saying that linoleic acid is responsible for the oxidation of LDL cholesterol. And this, I mean, that's patently false, because we know that linoleic acid was ubiquitous in traditional diets, particularly with sesame oil, which is 45% linoleic acid, right? And how could billions of people for thousands of years be completely fine and healthy with it, then all of a sudden, you know, it's off the charts? It's obviously not due to linoleic acid. Linoleic acid was a big part of traditional diets and still is.
What they found was a wide discrepancy between LDL levels in different populations and the cardiovascular diseases in those different populations. So they had to find something else to explain it, and they figured it was probably diet, things like smoking. Specifically, they talked about oxidized LDL, and they noted that what causes LDL to oxidize is polyunsaturated fatty acids.
He specifically said what causes LDL to oxidize is polyunsaturated fatty acids, which is a ridiculous claim again. Also, polyunsaturated fatty acids include omega-3s too, and 6s. But 6s are absolutely essential for health. 3s are not. We can make 3s. 6s are more essential. 3s play a very important part in our health, so we need them. But 6 is the essential part. And if the argument is that, well, traditional people didn't need much omega-6, that's wrong. They did. Sesame seed oil, right? Alone. But but omega-6s are rich in all the seeds, right? Like all the grains, beans, nuts, and seeds. And people ate them, you know, I mean, at least 50% of their diet a lot of times, if not more, just because that was survival, right? Traditional people didn't have supermarkets. They couldn't buy like 100% of their diet in animal food. Survival meant eating grains, beans, nuts, seeds, vegetables. Yeah, and animal food when you could get it. But it was just, it wasn't a choice to be healthy. I'm not making an argument for it. I'm not saying they did this because that was the healthiest. They did it because they were surviving. And it turned out that was fine. It was healthy enough. So his argument's just wrong. And this guy's not doing a great job in getting to the point of it. He's too hyper intellectual, too scientific, and he's not looking at the big picture. This is Indian guy who's defending vegetable oils. I know he's got these plant books back here and he's trying, but he's not really looking at the historical evidence.
In 1979, it was found that LDL does not cause the first step of atherosclerosis. It's only modified LDL. In 1989, they determined that it was specifically the peroxidation of polyunsaturated fatty acids in the lipids, and specifically linoleic acid, which was breaking down.
All right, I'm going to stop. I think we get the gist of it. This guy is very against seed oils, such a vague term, which really doesn't help us very much. Like I said, there's a minimal 5,000-year history to sesame oil. And let's just look at linoleic acid for a minute. All right, it is an omega-6 fatty acid. It's a polyunsaturated omega-6 fatty acid. So there's 3 kinds of fats. There's polyunsaturated, monounsaturated, and saturated. Right? The unsaturated are the liquid vegetable oils, mono and poly. The poly are the omegas, and the mono is the non-omegas, like olive oil is mostly mono. And then a lot of the seed oils have a lot of poly, which is omega-6, some 3, vegetable 3 ALA. But it is necessary for health, as I mentioned. Is one of the 2 essential fatty acids for humans who must obtain it through their diet, and the most essential because the body uses it as a base to make the others. The word linoleic derives from flax, blah, blah, blah. All right. We don't need to go too much into detail. One of the key points is looking at the amounts in different oils. So salicornia oil, that's, I don't know, safflower. So safflower oil is one of the big ones, and that's almost roughly 75% omega-6 linoleic acid. Okay, that's pretty big. We don't need much of these other ones. Cottonseed oil 54, corn oil 51, walnut oil, soybean oil is a big one, 50%. Sesame oil 45%. Okay, let's keep that in mind. All right. Canola oil, which they make a big deal out of, 17%, 17.8%. Sunflower oil, 20%. Chicken fat, 18 to 23%. Okay, nobody's talking about that. People don't really care. So again, there's an agenda here. Peanut oil, egg yolk, 16%. Nobody's going to make a big fuss about that. And the reason I mentioned the whole soy thing is that endlessly you hear about the feminizing effects of soy. Nobody will ever talk about the feminizing effects of other things, right? Except like, like microplastics or like, the receipts, but they don't talk about plus estrogen is necessary for men. Even we need some estrogen for our health, but there's always obfuscation, and people believe propaganda over facts is my point, right? You can talk to your blue in the face about how somebody will be like, on the McDonald's diet, demonizing soy is feminizing, when the amount of synthetic estrogens in factory farm meat is through the roof, and they literally have man boobs, and they'd be like, oh, don't eat your soy boy, or whatever, soy will make you a woman. Like, people do not make sense. And soy does not feminize the body, by the way. It does not make men feminine. It doesn't. That's the scientific fact. It has the phytoestrogens actually are protective against breast cancer, which means they do not fuel breast growth. Cancer is growth. Soy protects against, so that it does the opposite. And the mechanics of it are you have to look into it. There's many articles about it. It's just propaganda. So I'm saying there's a lot of propaganda here too. Egg yolk 16%, flax 14%. Right, and then we go down, coconut oil, macadamia. But people make a big deal about canola oil, but chicken fat is fine, right? Egg yolks are fine. Okay, so but sesame oil, let's look at sesame oil. There's a 5,000-year minimum history of sesame oil, because sesame seeds are one of the best oil crops, seed crops, nutrition crops out of all, because they grow, they're drought resistant. They can grow in the desert, they can grow in the hot weather, they can grow in the water, not in water, but with lots of water. And you can very easily make an oil from them. And the oil is very, very, very stable. It's one of the most stable oils. It resists rancidity because of the high levels of antioxidants in sesame oil. And this is why it's so ubiquitous in Africa, in the Middle East, in all of Asia, right? That this was the main oil. I think probably more people consume sesame oil traditionally than olive oil or any other oil. It is like the most probably consumed seed oil and seed crop in the world. Tahini, right? Halva, sesame, everything, sesame bread, sesame, dessert, sesame dishes, like so many things have sesame in them, or sesame oil, toasted sesame oil, light sesame oil, hot pepper sesame oil, right? There's so many different ways that people utilize sesame seeds and sesame seed oil. Now, if it was the case that there's black sesame seeds too, if there was the case that linoleic acid, which is 45% of sesame oil, was contributing to all these health issues, then we would have seen this throughout Africa, Middle East, and all of Asia, including India, for thousands of years, and we have not. So this is clearly an obfuscation. It's a scapegoat. It's a smokescreen. They're not telling the truth. They're lying. It's propaganda. The whole seed oil argument is false. Now, I mean, okay, so you can't say it's completely false, because where I would agree is that the non-traditional oils that are cheap and often GMO, let's go back, it's not because of the omega-6 fatty acids, which is necessary, and we have seen that it's not causing poor health, and there are plenty of scientists who argue against it. In fact, here's just a quick Harvard Health. Not that I think this is, necessarily, like, there's a lot of propaganda here, but there's plenty of arguments saying that omega-6s are not. So even if we're like trying to find out what the consensus is, there's a lot of argumentation. Are good for the heart. Omega-6 fats from vegetables are good for the heart, right? But we can see historically that also the claims about seed oils and omega-6 doesn't hold up, right? A large part of people's diet traditionally was omega-6. Now you could say, oh, well, Japanese eat plenty of omega-3s, fine. So you can have tons of omega-6s and omega-3s, and it still works out well, because Japanese, or some of the traditional Japanese, are one of the most long-lived people on the planet. But even without that, you go anywhere like, India, well, they obviously had ghee in India, so saturated fat and omega-6 fatty acids, because they use a lot of sesame seeds as well, sesame oil, sesame seeds. But look at the Middle East, they use sesame oil like in everything, including tahini. And they may not be, I don't know that they're, it doesn't stand out that they're the most long-lived people in the world, but certainly there's a lot of, I mean, they probably use olive oil too, depending on which area you're talking about, but they're healthy too. In any case, the claim that linoleic acid is going to lead to these, again, heart cardiovascular incidence is false. And again, correlation does not equal causation. He's specific, like, this is bad science. He's like singling it. He's like, well, this is the reason people, coronary, CVD, vascular cardiovascular disease skyrocket is because of seed oils. I mean, there's so many other factors, right? So, like, okay, let's go back to the list here. One of the main causes, if we're just talking about seed oil, there's so many different causes. I mean, people do the same thing with sugar. They say, look, here's where sugar is introduced, here's where disease went. And yeah, sugar is a major contributor of disease. But again, correlation does not equal causation, but we need correlation in order to establish causation. So it's a factor. There are many factors, but one of the big things with oil is the way people use oil, which is why this is where the smokescreen comes in. Nobody's talking about how everyone is using these vegetable oils, which is primarily frying, right? You take any oil, whether it's omega-6 rich, seed oils, or ghee, or beef lard, and you burn it, you're going to cause cancer, carcinogens, cancer-causing agents, right? Always. Like, so French fries, hamburgers, steaks, which are always grilled, right? Barbecue, all the dry heat where you're taking fat, every single restaurant, like, you watch all these cooking shows, every single time they cook, they are burning fat. This is carcinogenic. Doesn't matter what kind of oil you use. When you're burning fat, you're creating carcinogens, right? And you're damaging not only carcinogens, you're damaging the integrity of the fat. Fat is very sensitive, right? And one of the reasons sesame oil is so ubiquitous is because of high levels of antioxidants, which means that it resists oxidation. which means that the rancidity of oil is a major concern. So either you're leaving oil out for a long time, it's going rancid or quickly, or you're cooking it with dry heat and you're oxidizing it. Both those things are the same thing. So understand that rancid oil is oxidizing, and dry heat is also oxidizing oil. Do you understand that rancid oil is something we want to avoid because of inflammation? Well, dry heat to oil, any oil or fat, is also causing oxidation, therefore causing all of the things that we want to avoid with fat and oil, right? Which means carcinogens, but also arterial plaques and cellular degradation. Like, because oil is one of the things that we make our body out of. Well, one of the main components is one of the macronutrients, right? The macronutrients are carbohydrates, protein, and fat. And when we're burning any of these three things, in fact, we are degrading the quality of the material that we're building our body out of, contributing to all-cause mortality, right? So much more of a concern than seed oil. And I agree that some of these oils are not healthy. Like, I'm not going to use safflower oil, not because it's a seed oil, but because it's not a traditional ubiquitously used oil like sesame oil or olive oil. And it doesn't have the same, I don't know all that much, but I don't have any need for it. Like, why would I use safflower oil? I don't have any reason for it. Like, I'm not going to use any of the, I'm going to use soybean oil. All right, I mean, I'm not going to use soybean oil. I don't use soybean oil. I don't use walnut. I love walnuts, but I don't eat walnut oil. I'll eat soy products, but I'm not going to eat soy oil. I will eat sesame oil. I will not eat any of these other oils. I don't like chicken fat, but people cook with chicken fat. They have no problem with that, right? People love egg yolks. They've got no problem with that. Any case, I use olive oil. I'll use some butter sometimes, but there's also an argument that too much, saturated fat is not, and I agree with that. The balance for saturated fat are we don't live in a vacuum. Nothing is an island unto itself. The balance for saturated fat are like all the vegetable and herbs and spices that reduce cholesterol. That's how everything has, people want to make this one-sided argument. This is good, this is bad. And that's just wrong. It's bad thinking. It's just not that way. We need a complete, well-balanced diet. The vegans want to say animal food is bad. The carnivores want to say vegetable food is bad. And both of them are wrong. And they're overly simplistic, and they have childish thinking, even if they can be have PhDs and super intellects. That ultimately their intelligence is low level, because we need a well-balanced, varied diet, right? Some people are just like, oh, meat, we just need meat, that's it, meat, right? And that's ridiculous. I love my vegetables. I eat tons of vegetables, but I'm not again. I also need animal food for my personal pathway, right? I need all of it. But in any case, there's no real good case against these seed oils for the argument that they're making. I mean, the highly processed ones, I don't know. I mean, canola oil, even though it's actually pretty low in omega-6 linoleic acid, but the processing, the GMOs, canola oil is one of the GMO crops. So is soybean oil. Safflower oil, I'm not sure. I think, let's see. I wonder what the history is. It was first cultivated in Mesopotamia. Dyes and garlands made from safflowers. So it has a very long history, safflower oil. It's just not as common as an oil crop, as this oil for cooking. So I don't think it's nearly as good as sesame oil, not because of omega-6s, probably because it just doesn't have the same antioxidant level as sesame oil, which is incredibly stable. Sesame oil resists degradation. almost better than most oils, if not all. Probably olive oil and sesame. Olive oil and sesame oil are the two best oils, and we can't discount historical usage. I mean, the people have spoken. I mean, that's really there's no better argument than billions of people over thousands of years, right? Now that doesn't always hold up in the case of like grains because of the differences in lifestyle, where a high carbohydrate diet for our ancestors worked, where now we're with modern conveniences, and most people are very lazy and weak and pathetic, basically, if you ask me. We need much less carbohydrates, but it doesn't mean that all of a sudden these grains and oils and all this thing that people traditionally ate are wrong or bad. It's not. It's just we need to think about each thing on its own. So don't think about seed oil. Think about individual oils and understand they're all different. And there's better ones and worse ones for our health. I mean, again, one of the things that is really bad is that a lot of restaurants are buying these very cheap vegetable oils, and they're not treating them well, so they're bad to begin with. They're not organic. A lot of times they're GMO, and they're dirty. They have all sorts of toxins in them, and then they're dry heating them, frying them, right? And so that is a problem. But even if you take the best, if your argument is okay, olive oil, or what other, like avocado oil, right? Or maybe like lard or whatever, ghee. If you're frying with it, you're still degrading the oil, right? Pan fried, you're going to do it more quickly. Deep fried, you're going to do it over time. But the more you deep fry the oil, the more the oil degrades and the more carcinogens gather, and you're going to, oxidize the oil. So oxidation is what we're talking about. So just bottom line, whenever I use oil or fat, whether it's animal fat or vegetable oil, or roasting seeds or nuts, I'm very, very careful not to burn it. I always use water, right? Not for roasting. Obviously, if I'm going to roast some nuts or seeds, I don't use water. But like with oil, I don't fry. I don't fry because frying will degrade. And it's like, oh, but I love fried food. Well, I mean, make better choices so you're not like, constantly craving fried foods. I don't crave fried foods because my food is completely satisfying. I don't crave fried foods ever. Like, it's just not on my agenda at all, period. Right? Like, stop, like if you need fried food to feel satisfied, your diet's wrong. It's not a good diet. Like, you're not eating very satisfactory, healthy foods. So you need to look at what else you're eating, because I mean, there really is no reason to fry food. I mean, it's like a donut, it's like an ice cream cake or whatever, like that's not something that I'm gonna go out and eat. If I eat it like once a year or a celebration, fine, right? Or like, like that. Like if I go out with a friend and we happen to have like falafel or fried fish, fine. But that's my tolerance for it. I don't eat it at home, therefore I can afford to eat it once in a while as a special treat, but it's not something I crave. It's just it's a pure indulgence. So bottom line, it's not seed oil, it's not linoleic acid, it's not omega-6. Whenever somebody makes these arguments, realize that we've been eating ubiquitous amounts of omega-6, linoleic acid, seed oils through all of history without any problem, healthfully. And there's plenty of people who say it's healthy. That's not it. It's the cheap oils that have not been used traditionally that are then GMO'd and disgusting with all the chemicals, and then burning them, essentially burning these seed oils, right? So that's the issue. That's the problem. So and again, like the same argument could be had with soy. Like no, people did not only eat. I love fermented soy, but people ate tofu. People ate soy milk. People ate whole soybeans. I mean, I grew up with Japanese dishes. There's numerous dishes with whole soybeans that are traditional. So people ate soy, and it's has one of the most complete amino acid profile. It has the most complete amino acid profile out of any vegetable food. Honestly, I mean, that's why it is a major food crop to feed cows. I mean, these farmers are not stupid. They're feeding cows soybeans because it has the most complete amino acid profile, right? And it is not feminizing. It does not do that. I mean, Asians have less man boobs than Americans. And Asians do eat soy products. They eat tofu. We'll go to the Asian market. I live in, I go to the Asian market like at least once a week. It's full of soy products, like non-fermented. So I mean, it's just wrong. Like, people spread bad information. They're like, oh, Asian people don't eat non-fermented. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. There's tofu shops. They have tofu. There was a tofu shop near me. It closed down, but I mean, that's common for a lot of shops. They pop up, they close. There's a whole shop with tofu. It's just tofu, right? People eat lots of tofu. People eat lots of soy products, soy milk, all that traditionally. In any case, it does not cause man boobs. So anyway, a lot of bad information out there. And that's my 2 cents about seed oil. It's not the seed oil. It is the use of the seed oil and the poor quality of the seed oil. But again, sesame seed is a seed oil. But they'll whenever you hear them talk about seed oil, they'll be just like, oh, soybean, canola, safflower, and they won't mention sesame seeds because that completely ruins the argument. Like, watch, they'll do that. They'll never mention sesame oil because they're just like, oh, well, yeah, sesame oil is an outlier. People ate it like almost exclusively for thousands of years. It was most ubiquitous, widely used seed crop in the whole world, basically, oil crop. So that throws a wrench in the argument, but they don't want to be proven wrong. They just want to make a propaganda argument and avoid the real issue, which is that destroying the quality of any fat, period, will lead to poor health outcomes and all-cause mortality, which is the whole. I mean, you can't demonize grilled steaks and hamburgers because it's like you're ruining like a whole industry, right? But that's the issue. Burning the fat. That's the real issue. Like, go to every single cooking show. All they do, all of it, 100% is like burnt fat. That's all they do. I mean, barely. You'll see a soup once in a while, but it's almost always throw the steak on the grill and burn the shit out of it, right? The more burnt, the better. That's the problem. That's it right there. Barbecue. People like, you're not going to demonize barbecue because that's what makes America go around. Or fried chicken, right? Fried this, barbecued that, grilled that, seared this, fried that. Everything, all the cooking. It's the cooking style. I'm telling you, it's how people are cooking. That's the problem, and the poor quality ingredients. Poor quality, how people are cooking. That's the problem. But as always, people like to confuse the shit out of everything and make bad arguments and point the finger to avoid the real issue, which is that poor quality ingredients and burnt fat. So that's it. I mean, I really don't think I'm wrong on this. I mean, if somebody has a strong argument, I'd love to hear about it, but I don't believe there's any avoiding those points, the poor quality ingredients and the burnt. And the burnt's the main one, because even if you use even if you use the best fat in the world and burn it, you're going to get the same negative outcomes: cardiovascular disease and cancer and arterial plaque. All right, so that's it for now. I'll see you again soon. All right, bye.